Now it's time for America's Talking, with some headlines you can find at thecentersquare.com or in the description below. And here is just some of what's being discussed across the country. And we'll start with the U.S. House Oversight Committee report being released today called The Cost of Doing Nothing: How Tim Walz and Keith Ellison Fueled Minnesota's Fraud Explosion. Now, the reports, the House Oversight Committee Republicans say, it shows how senior Minnesota officials in the state, including Governor Walz and Attorney General Ellison, were aware of widespread taxpayer fraud in federally funded social service programs for years. And they possessed the authority to stop those payments and ban fraudulent providers from participating in these programs. But the official report from the U.S. House Oversight Committee says those Minnesota officials repeatedly failing to act. Here is what James Comer, the House Oversight Committee chairman, had to say in a statement. Billions of dollars were stolen because Minnesota state leaders turned a blind eye to rampant fraud and retaliated against state employees who dare to raise concerns. It is now clear the Walz administration chose to protect the system rather than the taxpayers. We're seeing the issue of fraud being debated across the country in various state houses. And it's not just one particular program over another. There's a lot of social service net programs that are meant to be that safety net for people, including food stamps or the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Years ago, decades ago, people got coupons that acted as food stamps, but now it's on a digital card, an EBT. And there's been some fraud that's been happening with that in Pennsylvania. Legislators looking at having chip-enabled EBT cards to help fight against some of that fraud.
House Bill 2540 modernizes Pennsylvania's EBT system by updating magnetic stripe cards to include secure chip-enabled technology. As benefit theft through card skimming and cloning continues to rise, we have responsibilities to provide recipients with the same security protections that most Americans already receive through their debit cards and their credit cards. For families relying on SNAP benefits to put food on the table, a stolen benefit can mean going without groceries. And unlike traditional bank customers, they often have limited options for recovery. And so this legislation helps prevent benefit theft. It protects taxpayers' dollars, and it keeps Pennsylvania's EBT system aligned with modern national standards.
Now, in Michigan, conversation about fraud, where they're looking at Medicaid and the open enrollment for the Affordable Care Act, and where fraud's happening there. Sabrina Carlette, an advocate, talking to a Michigan State House committee about where she sees most of the fraud happening. Is it the federal or the state level?
In my work, we have consulted with state-based marketplaces across the country. They have seen nowhere near the level of broker misbehavior that we have seen in the federal Healthcare.gov system. Now, it's true that, anytime you have, a federally funded program, there is going to be some modest amount of fraud, no matter what you do. But I think what clearly happened in 2024 is that brokers were taking advantage of a system vulnerability in Healthcare.gov. And what states have done is, they do things like two-factor authentication and other tools to minimize those security risks. They just have seen nowhere near the level of improper enrollments that Healthcare.gov has seen.
Now, in California, there's been conversations and a lot of reports about waste, fraud, and abuse in one particular program dealing with autism funding, and that sparked a resolution to ensure that the funds go to where they're needed. We have a state legislator in California talking about the importance of these funds, but also various associations saying that they had concerns of fraud, but there seem to be safeguards in this proposal advancing at the California State House.
In the autism community, they say If you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, because it is so different for so many individuals and families on the spectrum. And whether it is needing ABA therapy, whether it's the diagnosis and treatment of other comorbidities, every individual is different. Every need, every therapeutic is different. And it's so vitally important that, and sometimes that changes too, and it's so vitally important that the services are being provided when they're needed most, which is why I would love to be a co-author on this bill. It's vitally important. We need more resources for this community, and this is another starting point. I want to thank you for bringing it forward.
Really appreciate that.
Cassidy Heckman on behalf of the California Association of Health Plans. I want to thank the author, his staff, and the committee staff for working with us on this bill. We had significant concerns with the bill in print due to fraud, waste, and abuse in this area, which, if you've been tracking the news and investigations by the feds and the state, it's been pretty prevalent. That said, we appreciate the amendments that preserve utilization management, and after reviewing them in print, we're looking forward to removing our opposition. Thank you.
Thank you.
So different levels of fraud for different programs, from food stamps to Medicaid to autism funding. But to get a little bit of a sense of just how big of an issue this is for one state in particular, Texas Health and Human Services Inspector General Raymond Winter testified to a Texas committee just about how big of an issue this really is.
According to the National Healthcare Anti-Fraud Association, which is a coalition of government and non-government participants in this area, in this industry, up to 10% of a state's health and human services expenditures are lost every year due to waste, fraud, and abuse. By this metric, Texas loses $5.3 billion annually out of the $53 billion we spend on health and human services. According to another study in 2020 by Taxpayers Against Fraud, the average state loses 6.4% of its overall budget, not just the healthcare budget, but of its overall budget to fraud, waste, and abuse. And under that metric, the loss to Texas would be in excess of $10 billion annually. Of course, every dollar that's lost is not only a theft from taxpayers, but it also means that somebody is not receiving a benefit that they're entitled to. It's a loss for those citizens in Texas who rely on these benefits to put food on the table for their families and to provide health care for their families.
There's going to be a lot more to say about all of these different issues of which particular programs are suffering from fraud and how states in particular are going to go about trying to rein that in. You can stay up to date with some of the latest about what America is talking about by getting the headlines in your inbox at thecentersquare.com. From my studios in Central Illinois, I'm Greg Bishop. Join us back here Tuesday for more stories impacting you, the taxpayer, from all around the country, only with the Center Square Daily.